You want me to go to Nashville? Raquel Holmes shook her head. She was going to have to set down her casserole to deal with this nonsense, me. Everyone looked at her in expectant silence. Since the 5 young teachers had moved into the renovated old hotel last fall, there hadn't been a moment of silence in this courtyard, or anywhere else in town for that matter. They'd been hired to revive the high school, and wound up reviving the entire community of Pronghorn. But the shock of a silent courtyard was nothing on that of finding Amber Danes and her niece hanging out there. The Danes family generally kept to themselves and were reluctant to trust outsiders. While Raquel was grateful for the teachers' energy and innovation, and Amber's willingness to seek them out, she was just here to drop off a nutritious venison and zucchini casserole, not hop on a plane. Amber leaned forward in her chair, gesturing to her niece. Nevia's been asked to take part in a singing competition in Nashville. And whose fault is that? Raquel interrupted her. Mine, Nevia guessed. No, of course it's not your fault, honey, Raquel said. Her teenage daughters had been coaching her on being intentionally kind. It wasn't enough to just assume everyone knew she cared about them. Apparently, constructive criticism wasn't anyone's love language. It's literally her fault. Lucy Walker, the young social studies teacher, said, offering Nevia a fist bump because she slayed at the holiday pageant. The whole table cheered, forcing Raquel to speak over them. I was talking about Harlow Jameson. I'm guessing she set this up. Raquel turned on Vander Torn, the thoughtful science teacher. Seems like your girlfriend is scheming to get the whole town of Pronghorn to move to Nashville. Vander grinned, leaning back in his chair, but it was Amber who spoke. No, it was that producer friend of Harlow's, the guy from the 90s. Raquel's heart stopped, as though someone had yelled hammer time, then began grooving just as recklessly as the iconic song. Blood rushed to her face as she remembered a long, thrilling conversation after the Pronghorn holiday pageant. The guy from the 90s. Raquel slipped a hand into her tote bag, tapping her finger against the edge of a business card she'd hidden in the pocket. She could almost convince herself he was being more than polite. Raquel shook off the memory and refocused on Amber's words. He saw Nevia at the pageant and thought it would be good for her to sing in this competition to see if she even likes performing. Nevia was grinning, nodding enthusiastically as her aunt spoke, but Amber crossed her arms tightly and grumbled. Going off to Nashville is a fool's errand if you ask me, but I'm not going to stand in her way. Amber, suspicious of everyone and everything, particularly where her niece was involved, held eye contact with Raquel. No one in the hotel courtyard knew about the connection between Amber and Raquel. The Danes family had their share of challenges. A mistrust of the school system had left most of the family undereducated. Years ago, Amber had needed help to retain custody of Nevia, and Raquel had stepped in. She'd continued to quietly help out over the years. It wasn't a secret necessarily, but Raquel didn't make a big deal out of it. No one needed to go around tooting her own horn. Raquel would do anything for Amber but Nashville, spending more time with that producer guy. Raquel's memories of the holiday pageant felt like something from another reality. She'd had a wonderful time exercising her creativity by decorating the old ballroom. Folks in town had just learned that she created the jewelry sold at Mac's store and online, and while she didn't like undue attention, people had been complimenting her skills all day. Raquel's confidence had been at an all-time high as she watched the pageant where her 2 teenage daughters took on leadership roles, helping the event run seamlessly. Then shy, quiet Nevia Danes had brought down the house. Raquel felt so good about herself, her daughters, her community. She didn't think to keep herself contained when a handsome stranger started chatting with her. He was funny, down-to-earth, interesting, and interested in her. They laughed together. How long had it been since she had laughed with an attractive man? As they spoke, her confidence increased. She chatted easily, even telling him about her jewelry business. He was a single parent too, with a daughter in her late 20s now. It was as though he saw through the protective shell she'd cultivated to the charming, successful, stylish woman she once aspired to be. It wasn't until he handed her his card that she realized who he was. Wilson, Range, 1990s country sensation, current Nashville producer to stars, had written, "I'd love to see you again. Please call me," on the back of his card. Wilson Range. And while she was flattered, thrilled to her toes, she was still just Raquel, Subaru-driving single mom living in a tiny town in the least populated corner of Oregon. For all she knew, he chatted up women everywhere he went and handed out cards with flirty-sounding sentences. Still, it was nice to get a card. But Raquel wasn't comfortable with attention. It was best to keep her feet on the ground and raise her daughters. "Look, I just stopped by to bring you my special zucchini and venison casserole." Raquel addressed the table. "Not fly off to Music City. Mrs. Holmes, we all talked about it. You're the only person around here I can ask to go with me and Auntie Amber to Nashville." Navia cleared her throat and raised her chin. "I need the mama bear energy. Please," Amber said for possibly the first time in her life. "You're the biggest mama bear in town. Well, no argument there." But could she do it? Show up in Nashville and see if the magic she had experienced with Wilson was real? Her heart picked up again, the beat rushing in her ears. Navia gazed up at her with her big eyes. Raquel knew good and well there was no way Amber would be comfortable taking her niece to Nashville on her own, and there was no way she'd let her go alone. She huffed out a breath. "Fine then. I guess we'd better start packing." Wilson. Range wasn't used to feeling nervous. He'd messed up his life so completely in his 20s, there really wasn't anything he hadn't failed at by this point. But leaving his number with a beautiful, fascinating woman and not hearing back, yeah, that made him nervous. "Have we confirmed Navia Danes?" Carol asked, not looking up from her tablet as she went through their calendar. His daughter was an in-demand songwriter, so when they got the chance to work on a project together, he jumped on it. Almost. Unbreak My Heart. A competition for aspiring young artists would take place the day after Valentine's Day. Most of the kids, or rather their parents, had fought to get a spot. Navia didn't realize he was doing her a huge favor by inviting her, and that was for the best. She was a talented singer, but talent didn't always translate into a happy career in the music industry. He wanted Navia to get a chance to try on her dreams before committing to them. And Wilson never signed anyone before they graduated from high school. That was a hard and fast rule. Kids needed the chance to explore life outside of the limelight. He knew from personal experience how early fame could derail the process of growing up. Almost. His daughter pressed the subject. "I was at the pageant, Dad. I saw her take the stage. That girl is not going to miss her shot at Nashville. The issue is a protective aunt who hasn't had a lot of experience traveling. They're trying to find a second chaperone to join them." Carol finally looked up from her screen, a slow smile growing across her face. "I see." She nodded. Wilson could feel himself flush. "And let me guess, you're hoping the chaperone is a beautiful woman in her mid-40s who makes stunning turquoise jewelry and has strong opinions on everything." Wilson attempted a casual shrug. Carol laughed. "I don't think Raquel is coming. We could barely separate the two of you at the cookie table." "She'll be here." Wilson waved the comment away. "I've literally never seen anyone look at you with stars in her eyes like that. She likes you." Raquel felt the same connection, didn't she? Their conversation at the pageant had been so interesting, so fun, and engrossing. Neither of them had even noticed as other guests started to leave. Then, every time they tried to say goodbye, one of them would find something else to talk about, and they were off again, discussing childhood dogs or their feelings about hardwood flooring. One of the teachers had finally asked them to leave. Wilson had shut down plenty of bars in his youth, but this was the first time he'd been asked to leave a cookie table at closing time. I gave her my number, Wilson admitted. You did, Dad. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. She hasn't called. Nobody calls these days. Carol laughed. It's not like that sad song you used to sing about using your last quarter at a payphone then having to leave a message on your true love's answering machine. Hey, my last quarter was a big hit, and I'm reminded of that fact every time I go to the supermarket. Wilson chuckled, but he knew what his daughter was unwilling to admit. Raquel would have to overlook his very rocky past to date him. There were plenty of women in Nashville who were interested in him for his connections, but it had been a long, long time since he'd met anyone who was interested in him. A quick Google search would unearth some pretty rough years in Wilson's personal life. Raquel didn't need his mess. She had a life, her daughters, her business all back in Pronghorn. Wilson had walked away from fame and the party lifestyle for good. He had quit singing entirely after he had tanked his career as penance for the chaos he'd wrought. Now he confined himself to supporting other artists and occasionally strumming his old guitar, but he would never perform again. Oh, sweet, Carol glanced up from her tablet. Navia just confirmed, and Carol scanned the message. It looks like she'll be accompanied by her Aunt Amber and a Ms. Raquel Holmes. Carol grinned. Looks like you're back in the game, Dad. Am arriving in Nashville on Valentine's Day, Raquel asked. That's what the email says. Raquel's oldest daughter, Taylor, perched on the edge of the bed while her second daughter, Morgan, stood in the doorway. That guy from the 90s Wilson Range sent plane tickets. A car will pick you up at the airport and take you to your hotel. Then he and his daughter have invited you all over for dinner that night. The next day is the singing competition, followed by dinner. Taylor looked up from her phone. Your weekend's gonna be lit. Nervousness washed over Raquel. She'd read the email from Wilson an embarrassing number of times. How had it just now occurred to her that February 14th was Valentine's Day? Because it had been years since a day celebrating romantic love was even on her radar. Raquel turned back to her closet. Now she really didn't know what to pack. I guess I should take my good turtleneck. I'll need to shave the pills off. She pulled a navy blue sweater from her closet. Taylor snatched it out of her hand and put it back on the hanger. Absolutely not. What am I supposed to wear then? It's not like I have time to go shopping at In Style in Klamath Falls before the trip. Or did she? Raquel checked her watch. If she left now, she could be in Klamath Falls by 6. Don't worry, Mom. We've got you. Raquel turned slowly to face Morgan. Why is the tone of your voice making me nervous? Morgan giggled, then slipped into the hallway, returning with a large box. What are you girls up to? Taylor exchanged a glance with her sister. Look, Mom, this is a really big deal for Navia. You need to dress the part. I'm a chaperone. By those standards, I should be wearing a high-necked long-sleeve dress that goes down to my toes. And so should Navia, for that matter. Morgan set the package on the bed. Taylor grinned as she opened the box. What did you do? Raquel asked. Just a little shopping, Morgan said. Most online retailers didn't deliver as far out as Pronghorn. Leave it to her girls to figure out where they could find fast delivery in time to send her off to Nashville. She was simultaneously proud and annoyed. Morgan pulled out a new pair of stylishly cut dark wash jeans. Taylor set 2 elegant linen blouses next to the jeans, pointing out how the tops would work with the jewelry Raquel designed. There was a sharp-looking knit dress, ankle boots, and... Wait! Is that a... Oh no! Absolutely not! Mom, it's just a miniskirt. It's barely 10 inches long. Exaggerate much? Taylor asked. Morgan held out the scrap of fabric. Just try it on. Reluctantly, Raquel took the miniskirt and the fitted top she was supposed to wear with it. It took a moment to get the outfit situated and another to pick out the jewelry to go with it. Looking back at her from the mirror was a confident, stylish woman. vaguely familiar, like an old friend she'd nearly forgotten about. She looked good. The few wrinkles around her eyes looked wise, not tired. The streak of gray in her dark hair was dramatic. "Mom, seriously? You look good." The shock in Morgan's voice was almost funny. Raquel turned in the mirror. If she was going to do this, spend Valentine's Day in the company of the first man who had inspired anything in her in years, she may as well do it in style. Taylor let out a whistle. "Look out, Nashville! Dad! What are you doing?" Wilson spun around and nearly fell off the dining room chair. He steadied himself against the antler light fixture from which he was trying to untangle an enthusiastic bunch of Valentine's Day-themed Mylar balloons. "Decorating." Carol crossed her arms and shook her head at him. Wilson caught an uncomfortable glimpse of the situation from his daughter's perspective. Pink and red streamers hung at odd angles from the exposed rafters. Sweethearts, candy-inspired throw pillows with messages like, "Be mine and kiss me," were strewn across his stickly furniture. The sink was loaded with a mishmash of flowers that he'd intended to arrange, but floral design was even more of a disaster than the balloons. No, his place was a calamity. It looked like Barbie's dream house had gotten into a fight with a rustic lodge and was winning. Carol let out a sigh. "Respectfully, Dad, we are not decorating people. We are musicians. We hire people to decorate for us if we decorate at all." "I just want it to look nice," Wilson said. "It did look nice before you started decorating." Wilson climbed down off the chair. "I'm nervous," he admitted. "I know, and I'm really proud of you for putting yourself out there. Raquel is great, and I'm glad you two are getting another chance to know each other. She likes you." Was she interested in him? They'd texted a few times since she'd agreed to join Amber and Navia and help them navigate the trip. Each time, the thread of texts started out formally, then quickly turned into a light-speed series of pings as they connected over topics like mini golf or their shared love of grocery store apple fritters. "This weekend is about Navia Danes," he reminded his daughter. "I have high hopes for that kid, but it's important for her to know what this industry is before she commits. Just like it's important for you to know who Raquel is before you get even more crushed out on her. But seriously, Dad, balloons." "I went into the store and asked for decorations and took whatever the lady gave me." "She's supposed to be the expert." "An expert at making big sales," Carol muttered. Wilson settled his arm around her shoulders. "I'm just glad you're staying for dinner and that the focus will be on Navia." "Dinner? Were you going to tell me I was invited?" Where else were you going to spend a Friday evening? Celebrating Valentine's Day, she guessed. "Wait, Dad." Carol put a hand on his arm. "You weren't thinking of cooking?" "Oh, no way. I mean, I like her. A lot." He grinned, finally able to see the humor in the situation. "So, under no circumstances will I attempt to cook for her." Carol patted his arm. "Good call." Wilson scanned the room. "Do you think we have time to clean all this up before she gets here?" Carol checked her phone for the time, but before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Wilson's heart picked up the chime, echoing the lively, hopeful sound. The enthusiastic mess of his home evaporated with the reality of Raquel. "She's here." Raquel rang the doorbell and stepped back. Then she stepped farther back physically behind Amber and Navia. She was here as backup. That's all this was, so she would stand in the back. The door flew open. Wilson, even more gorgeous than she'd remembered, seemed to look straight past Amber and Navia directly at her. Then he smiled. Raquel held eye contact and grinned back. Okay, maybe she was a little more than a chaperone. "Welcome!" Carol nudged her father out of the doorway and gestured at Amber and Navia to come into the house. "So great to see you. Did you have any issues at the airport?" Wilson waited at the door. So did Raquel. "Hi," he said, a flush running up his neck. "Hi," Raquel repeated. "It sure is nice to see you here." His southern drawl warmed her insides. Raquel gazed up at him, her smile growing. Had she wondered if that spark was real? It was definitely real, and more than just a spark. She tried to steady her nerves. Who did she think she was standing on the front stoop of Wilson Range's house, wearing her stylish new jeans and blouse, flirting with the former heartthrob, or current heartthrob if her respiratory system was anything to go by? "Dad, are you going to invite her in?" Carol asked. "Sorry." "Where are my manners?" Wilson reached out to take her hand, sending a jolt of pleasure through her as he guided her in the front door, where she was met with a riot of red and pink. "Wow, you really go all out on Valentine's Day," she said. He groaned. "Sorry about that. I was going for festive. Then you nailed it. It looks great." "Does it?" His gaze connected with hers, and she got the sense that her opinion really mattered to him. Back home, she often gave her opinion, and no one was ever particularly interested. Wilson seemed to hang on her answer. "It's perfect." She scanned the room, eyes landing on something that made her heart beat nearly as hard as Wilson did. A huge farmhouse sink filled with flowers just waiting to be arranged. "Did you need help with those flowers?" she asked. "Oh no, I forgot about the flowers. I meant to have that done." "You know I'm pretty good at arranging flowers." "You are." He turned from the flowers, smiling at her. "I could have guessed that. You're so artistic. Would you want to help me out with them?" Raquel peeked into the living room where Amber and Navia were chatting with Carol. Everything was cool. She looked at the flowers and the gorgeous man standing next to her. This had to be every woman's ultimate fantasy. But Raquel hesitated. Was it okay to walk in and start arranging someone else's flowers? Her girls were working with her on not just jumping in and taking over all the time. But it was a whole sink full, and Wilson really did look like he wanted help. "I have some vases," he said. Or rather, one vase and a lot of flowers. "This is a disaster. I'm sorry, I just wanted the house to look nice when you got here." Raquel's mouth went dry. When had a man ever gone through the effort of making his house look nice for her? The situation was confusing and warm and happy and... Oh, he had some tall coffee mugs that would be perfect for little bouquets of rose and lily. "You have those coffee cups in that cute little picture and ooh, mason jars." Raquel gave into her bone-deep decorative urges and started pulling receptacles off the shelf. "You sure you don't mind?" he asked. "Are you kidding? This is my favorite thing. You couldn't have come up with a better activity." He met her at the sink. "So, is this the perfect date?" Raquel blinked. A jolt of electricity ran through her body. "Is this a date?" He flushed, inadvertently coordinating with the carnations. "The streamers and the balloons didn't tip you off." Raquel laughed, giving herself over to the pleasure of being in his company. 20 feet away, Navia and Amber sat in the living room with Carol. Navia was flushed and excited. Amber had her arms crossed and was doing her best to look protective, but you could tell she was excited to be here too. No one seemed to miss her or Wilson one bit, and this was a date. She hadn't misinterpreted their connection. The message on his business card had been very clear. Wilson, range 19... 90s heartthrob, current music producer and good man, had wanted to see her again. And here they were, seeing each other. Raquel glanced up at Wilson. "Yes, absolutely. This is the perfect date. Now hand me that mason jar. I've got a vision for these mums." She couldn't predict where any of this was going, but right here, right now, it was perfect. Wilson was having trouble tracking the conversation. Navia and her aunt sat on the sofa facing him, chatting away. But Raquel was right next to him, making it hard to focus on anything other than how pretty her eyes were. He'd known she was something special the day they met. It was like that feeling when you hear a song for the first time and know in your soul it's going to be a huge hit. Now she was in his living room, where several very nice bouquets graced the coffee and end tables. She was even more beautiful and capable than he'd remembered. I listened to your music. Navia was perched on the edge of the sofa, nervously kneading one of the sweetheart's throw pillows as she spoke. My grandpa has the CDs. She looked at her aunt. We like the song about the payphone. Wilson shot his daughter a look. See, do you ever sing it anymore? Navia asked. Nope, I don't sing anymore. Never, never. Wilson's voice was firm. He was tempted sometimes. The night he'd met Raquel, he'd found himself humming, almost singing, as he strolled out of the venue. But he'd lost the privilege of singing when he had ruined his career. He wasn't going back. I love all your songs, Navia continued. It must have been so fun, touring and performing to huge crowds. Dad had a little too much fun in those days, Carol said. It's true. I didn't fully understand the pressure of fame, he said to Navia. That's why it's important to me that you take this slow. If you enjoy the competition tomorrow, we can continue to look for similar opportunities until you graduate from high school. At that point, you'll have a good sense of all the ways a person can make a living in country music, and you will be able to make a choice about what you want to pursue. I want to be a star, Navia said. Let's just settle your horses, her aunt admonished. I understand, Wilson said. I felt the same way at your age, and I paid the price for rushing in too fast, too young. He gazed at Raquel. Did she know how far he'd fallen? Raquel held his gaze, then placed her hand on his arm. It was a simple gesture, but said everything he needed to hear. Dad made some bad choices, Carol said. He's made amends for most of them. But I don't think anything is going to heal the world from the mullet-mustache combo. No, Navia shrieked. Do you have a picture? Of course I have a picture. Carol stood despite Wilson's protests and headed for the den. I stand by that choice, Wilson called after her. He looked at Raquel. I don't really want you to see it, but it was a big hit in 1997. Raquel grinned at him. I know all about the mullet. The denim on denim. The chambray shirts with the sleeves ripped off. She turned to Amber and Navia and admitted I had a poster of him mullet and all in my dorm room at college. Amber and Navia laughed even harder. Navia loosened her grip on the pillow. It was nice to see her relax. You did? Wilson asked. Raquel nodded, holding his gaze. I like that song about the payphone, too. Carol returned with the picture distracting Amber and Navia as Raquel said I was a big fan. But I'm even more impressed with what you've done in the years since then, championing new artists and helping kids like Navia navigate this system. Wilson let the compliment settle. For most of his adult life, he'd viewed his producing career as a consolation prize after his massive failure. Raquel didn't seem to see it that way at all, and think someday we'll all be looking at pictures of Navia when she too made questionable fashion choices at the start of her career. Carol joked. At this, Navia went pale again, wrapping her arms more tightly around the pillow. I hope I do okay tomorrow, she said, her voice trailing off. You're going to do great, Wilson said. Given what he knew of her, Wilson fully expected Navia to place in the top 3 at the competition. But she might find the experience too stressful or not enjoy singing before an unknown audience. It was better she knew what the job entailed now, so she could best plan for the future. As for his future, Raquel was an unexpected plot twist. He couldn't wait to see where this relationship would go. That 8-year-old was wearing a wig, Raquel whispered. Who puts their child in a wig? And are those fake fingernails? That's just the tip of the iceberg, Wilson responded. Wilson, Raquel, and Navia were backstage at the Unbreak My Heart competition. Navia's aunt Amber and Wilson's daughter Carol were in the audience waiting for her to perform. Navia glanced at a girl in head-to-toe sequins, then looked down at her own outfit. Raquel's daughters had not only dressed their mom, they'd helped Navia select an outfit too. She looked wholesome and down to earth in one of the Pronghorns t-shirts the kids had made for soccer season, a denim skirt and boots. But wholesome and down to earth didn't seem to be the prevailing vibe. Nevia grew paler. "Are you sure we're in the right competition? You're gonna kill it out there," Wilson said. Nevia tugged at her skirt. "It's just that everyone is so polished and flashy." Wilson looked directly into her eyes. "These other kids are polished and flashy because they think they need that to get an edge. You don't need to distract the judges with sequins or hair extensions. You have an extraordinary voice and an authenticity that draws people to you." The words were exactly what Nevia needed to hear. She nodded solemnly. "And I want to remind you, even if you place in this competition, I will strongly suggest you wait until you have graduated from high school, or better yet college, before you pursue a career in music. The industry's not going anywhere, and neither is your talent." Nevia swallowed hard, then straightened her spine. Raquel ran her hand along Wilson's arm, silently thanking him for the pep talk. He glanced into her eyes, surprised. Then he wound his fingers through hers, settling their palms together. A flush ran up her neck, and she felt as young and full of hope as the country music performers surrounding them backstage. "She's gonna do great," Wilson whispered in her ear. "How do you know that?" Raquel whispered back. "How did you know what to do with those flowers in my sink?" She laughed. Wilson continued. "How did you know how to make Amber feel included at dinner last night?" "Well, that's just—" Raquel tried to wave away his words. She wasn't comfortable with compliments. "How did you know how breathtaking you would look in those earrings?" Raquel was grateful for the dim lights as she blushed even harder. How was this possibly her life, holding hands with a wonderful man as they helped a young woman embark on her dreams? It was like she'd taken an unexpected turn and walked into a world of color and music. Up next, all the way from the Oregon outback, a voice boomed from the stage. Nevia looked back at her and Wilson, a big grin spreading across her face, as the announcer said, "Let's give it up for Nevia Danes." It was time. Raquel set aside her own mixed feelings of excitement and confusion and held her breath. Nevia held up a hand and waved to the audience as she walked on stage. Her step faltered only briefly. Then her smile shone as she called out, "Hi there, Nashville." Wilson gave Raquel's hand a squeeze. He was right. Their girl was gonna kill it. Nevia, as the young folks might say, slayed. The performance went exactly as Wilson had predicted. The shy, quiet girl from Pronghorn, Oregon brought the house to their feet. She started with a classic ballad stunning the audience into silence, then filled them with joy and hope as she sang a modern upbeat hit currently topping the charts. "I did it!" Nevia cried as she came flying off the stage and straight into Raquel's arms. Raquel hugged the girl as if she were one of her own daughters. "You were fantastic." "Phenomenal," Wilson agreed. Nevia's Aunt Amber appeared at their side, face stern. She looked worried and even more tense than she had before the show, as though she was more frightened by the idea of her niece's success than the possibility of her failure. "You did good," Amber said, then looked over her shoulder. "Now we can get out of this place." Nevia's face fell. Wilson understood that Amber and Nevia had a complicated background and that Amber was fiercely protective of her niece. It was clear that Nevia wanted to stay and watch the rest of the competition, then celebrate, not go back to a hotel room. But Amber was intensely uncomfortable, and that made Nevia nervous. Wilson hit on a compromise. "Can I take you all out to dinner first?" he asked. Amber recrossed her arms over her chest and grumbled. Raquel slid up next to Amber. "Well, I for one am starving, and I hear they think they have some decent barbecue in this town." Amber snorted. I'd like to see anyone beat Grandma Danes at the grill. Raquel looked meaningfully at Wilson. He took the cue. Let's put it to the test. Nashville's best against the Danes' family recipe. Not gonna be much of a contest, Amber said, but if you want to waste your money. Navia gave him a shy smile of thanks. I do, Wilson said. I'm excited to take the long shot on Talon's barbecue house. Amber marched to the exit, keeping a protective hand on her niece's arm. Wilson and Raquel followed. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Now that I've gotten to know Amber a little, I realize there's no way she would have come here or let Navia come without you. Raquel glanced down her dangling silver and turquoise earrings, catching the light. I'm happy to help. Wilson took a risk and slipped his hand back into hers. Her smile grew brighter as she wove their fingers together. He leaned down and whispered in her ear, I'm happy you're here. Dinner for 6 wasn't the date he'd originally hoped for when he gave his card to Raquel. But right now, he couldn't think of anything he wanted more. There wasn't much time left on the clock for Raquel's stay in Nashville, and he intended to use that time to make sure this visit wouldn't be her last. If Raquel were to evaluate her performance as a chaperone, she'd be forced to give herself a solid C. Navia was safe and happy, but Raquel's mind was fixed solidly on someone else. The Nashville barbecue restaurant was lively. Harlow and Carol had joined them for dinner and taken over helping Amber feel comfortable. They peppered Navia with questions and kept the conversation rolling while Raquel and Wilson talked only to each other. It felt like their own private world of effortless conversation and thrilling connection. Hey, Dad? Dad! Raquel blinked as a hand waved between her face and Wilson's. My goodness, they had gotten awfully close together, hadn't they? Carol held up her phone. Navia came in second in the Unbreak My Heart competition. A cheer rose up around the table. Navia looked like she was about to float to the ceiling. Raquel furrowed her brow. Second, to whom she was far and away the best performer up there. Second place in a major competition like this is no small feat, Harlow reminded her. I just feel sorry for those judges, Raquel said. Anyone with ears could have told you she'd take first. Ms. Holmes' second place is an honor, Navia said. I was thrilled just to get to participate. Well, you've got big things coming your way, Raquel said. You may need to get some bigger britches. She glanced at Harlow to share what was now a joke, though it had once been a sore spot. Harlow, Amber, and Navia all laughed. Carol picked up Navia's glass and rattled the ice. I think our girl needs another lemonade to celebrate. Navia widened her eyes and grinned. Yes, please. Dad, why don't you and Raquel go get it? There's that bar outside, and that would be easier than trying to flag down our busy waitress. There was a sparkle to Carol's eye that Raquel chose not to interpret. Maybe it takes 2 people to get a lemonade in Nashville. Who was she to say? Raquel and Wilson left the table and headed into the courtyard. Lights were strung overhead, and heaters radiated cozy pools of warmth. Wilson took her hand as they made their way to the bar. Raquel paused by a redbud tree and looked up into Wilson's eyes. Wilson, what are we doing? He dipped his head to look into her face. Having fun. She nodded, grinning. So much fun. He smiled, his eyes scanning her hair, her face, and coming to rest on her lips. I don't know about you, he whispered, but I'm starting to fall for an amazing person. He leaned into her, his mouth so close to hers. How long had it been since she'd kissed a man? She nodded, keeping her gaze on his lips. Me too. Raquel had never felt this way. In her teens, she'd been awkward and uncomfortable in her skin. In her 20s, she had been obsessed with making the right decisions and not emulating her parents' mistakes. In her 30s, she was just trying to hold on, recovering from the implosion of what she thought was a safe bet on marriage to a boring man. As it turns out, even boring men can treat a woman poorly and walk away from a family. Yet here she was at 45, surrounded by lights and flowers in the courtyard of a fancy Nashville restaurant. It felt like all the romance and magic she'd been wary of in her youth had just been waiting for this moment, gathering like a summer storm. Raquel glanced from Wilson's lips into his eyes. She let herself drift closer. He pulled in a breath, their lips met. Her eyelids slid shut, and she was kissing him. The summer storm breaking around her warm and much-needed rain, falling, sweeping her heart up in its current. It felt like more than their first kiss. It felt like her first kiss ever. But she was leaving tomorrow. He had a life in Nashville. Hers was in Pronghorn. Their first kiss could very well be their last. T.F. Raquel were to evaluate her performance as a chaperone, she'd be forced to give herself a solid C. Navia was safe and happy, but Raquel's mind was fixed solidly on someone else. The Nashville barbecue restaurant was lively. Harlow and Carol had joined them for dinner and taken over helping Amber feel comfortable. They peppered Navia with questions and kept the conversation rolling, while Raquel and Wilson talked only to each other. It felt like their own private world of effortless conversation and thrilling connection. "Hey, Dad! Dad!" Raquel blinked as a hand waved between her face and Wilson's. My goodness, they had gotten awfully close together, hadn't they? Carol held up her phone. Navia came in second in the Unbreak My Heart competition. A cheer rose up around the table. Navia looked like she was about to float to the ceiling. Raquel furrowed her brow. Second to whom she was far and away the best performer up there. Second place in a major competition like this is no small feat, Harlow reminded her. I just feel sorry for those judges, Raquel said. Anyone with ears could have told you she'd take first. Ms. Holmes, second place is an honor, Navia said. I was thrilled just to get to participate. Well, you've got big things coming your way, Raquel said. You may need to get some bigger britches. She glanced at Harlow to share what was now a joke, though it had once been a sore spot. Harlow, Amber, and Navia all laughed. Carol picked up Navia's glass and rattled the ice. I think our girl needs another lemonade to celebrate. Navia widened her eyes and grinned. Yes, please. Dad, why don't you and Raquel go get it? There's that bar outside, and that would be easier than trying to flag down our busy waitress. There was a sparkle to Carol's eye that Raquel chose not to interpret. Maybe it takes two people to get a lemonade in Nashville. Who was she to say? Raquel and Wilson left the table and headed into the courtyard. Lights were strung overhead, and heaters radiated cozy pools of warmth. Wilson took her hand as they made their way to the bar. Raquel paused by a redbud tree and looked up into Wilson's eyes. Wilson, what are we doing? He dipped his head to look into her face. Having fun. She nodded, grinning. So much fun. He smiled, his eyes scanning her hair, her face, and coming to rest on her lips. I don't know about you, he whispered, but I'm starting to fall for an amazing person. He leaned into her, his mouth so close to hers. How long had it been since she'd kissed a man? She nodded, keeping her gaze on his lips. Me too. Raquel had never felt this way. In her teens, she'd been awkward and uncomfortable in her skin. In her 20s, she had been obsessed with making the right decisions and not emulating her parents' mistakes. In her 30s, she was just trying to hold on, recovering from the implosion of what she thought was a safe bet on marriage to a boring man. As it turns out, even boring men can treat a woman poorly and walk away from a family. Yet here she was, at 45, surrounded by lights and flowers in the courtyard of a fancy Nashville restaurant. It felt like all the romance and magic she'd been wary of in her youth had just been waiting for this moment, gathering like a summer storm. Raquel glanced from Wilson's lips into his eyes. She let herself drift closer. He pulled in a breath, their lips met. Her eyelids slid shut, and she was kissing him. The summer storm breaking around her warm and much-needed rain falling, sweeping her heart up in its current. It felt like more than their first kiss. It felt like her first kiss ever. But she was leaving tomorrow. He had a life in Nashville. Hers was in Pronghorn. Their first kiss could very well be their last.